Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Alter Quest from Blacklist Games. This review is arguably way too late, considering Alter Quest has delivered quite some time ago, and Blacklist Games, I don't really know what the story is with them nowadays, but Alter Quest is a 1 to 4 player dungeon crawling adventure, and in my quest to, pun not intended, in my quest to go through all my various big box adventures that I have not yet gotten to, I finally dove into Alter Quest rather than getting rid of it because I was like, you know what, I want to give this game a fair shot. I was excited for it, I wanted it, I backed it, it arrived, 2 years went by and I didn't play it, and I was like, you know what, we have to properly dive into this game before it goes away, and so I did so, and well, it's going away. It's definitely going away. Alter Quest is a 1 to 4 player dungeon crawler adventure with a campaign story mode as well. A bunch of expansions, a bunch of content out there, a variety of characters as you play through the Sailor Brothers modular deck system, the MDS. The modular deck system being the idea that you have multiple decks managing different things, and the way you combine those decks will give you a different puzzle every single time. So in this case, you have your hero decks you'll be playing with, because you know you have your heroes. But that's just typical. Every hero should have a bunch of cards, and in this case, they have their decks over here. But then you'll also have a few more decks. You're going to have the various enemies you're fighting against. In this case, we have our boss deck, and we have our enemy decks over here, so it's going to be 2 more decks you're playing through. And then you also have the specific quest deck in this case. Right now we're playing through the escape over here. That's going to be another deck that drives the story forward. So we have effectively hero decks, boss deck, enemy decks, and a quest deck, all driving how this system is going to operate. Now, there will be certain commonalities in place within the system, because at the end of the day, this is a dungeon crawling adventure. You have this beautiful looking board over here. You're going to be crashing through doors, spawning enemies, not entirely spawning enemies. The dungeon decks will spawn their enemies, but you're going to be crashing through doors, popping up various terrain features that will give you various terrain to interact with in different ways, all while trying to accomplish the specifics of the quest deck. There's going to be a set of rules for the quest deck in terms of what you're trying to do, whether you're trying to track down the last altar, whether you're being mindful of some nemesis in the shadows trying to hunt you down, whether you're trying to escape from the dungeon. They all give you a reason as to why you're exploring the dungeon and what you're trying to do as you explore the dungeon. But past that, the key notes are the same. You are adventurers. You are wandering through the dungeon. You're trying to accomplish your quests as you wander across the dungeon. You're taking down the bad guys that will be drawn from this deck of cards that will be the various bad things that happen, often generating new bad guys for you to take out and deal with, sometimes generating various bad things that happen within the dungeon. And then you'll have a boss deck that you are slowly going through that almost counts as a timer on the scenario, because that boss deck initially is just throwing all the bad scenario things at you, but as time goes on, eventually you're going to have some big giant, big bad who's going to try to take you down. You're going to have to deal with that, all while you're slowly ticking through the clock of the adventure, trying to accomplish your goals. So again, high level, dungeon crawling, adventure, modular enemies, modular boss, modular quest, and of course the modular heroes, all giving you different ways to puzzle through the adventure. And then past that, you're going to be taking actions. Your actual sequence in the game is going to be handled by this nice little player aid, which actually does a decent job giving you the main information you need to know. Rulebook, not quite as decent a job, but the player aid, once you know it's up, gives you a decent overview of the information. You're going to take your hero turn, where every single hero is going to go ahead and refresh their cards. Basically, in the game, you're going to have your own pool of cards that will refresh. You'll start with your hero with 2 equipment. Various enemies will be assigned to the heroes in terms of the way they activate and how they run. But you're going to refresh the various hero cards in your pool. Then you're going to go ahead and take 3 actions. You can move, and a single move action involves moving 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3. You also go ahead and take a card action. Many of the cards you have are going to action. So for example, if we're playing over here as Rowan, we have our action, an attack action, using our trait over there. I don't even remember what these traits are, but there's 6 different traits on the heroes, and if you use the traits, you're going to use an attack action using those 2 dice, because that's his stat over there. So you can take actions on your various cards, and you're going to start with your equipment cards, be able to play cards as you go as well. You're going to have a hand of cards you're managing, and some of those cards will be one-time use abilities, others will add to your tableau as you play. Speaking of which, you can go ahead and do an interact action. You can resolve an interact action on any card in play, and again, that might be various scenario effects. Very often the terrain elements that you're going to encounter within different rooms will have different interact options on them. You can also play an action card. Many of the action cards in your hand will not enter your tableau. They're going to be one-use cards, and so you can go through your hand of cards and try to figure out which action is going to help you. Again, paying attention to the stats you're going to roll for in terms of different stats across your hero that you're going to check that attribute. Also paying attention to the dice pool. There's going to be an alter dice pool over here with various dice that are rolled over here, and you can trade in those dice. You can spend a die from the die pool and then return to the die pool in order to get extra abilities on your cards. You're going to be paying a lot of attention to that die pool as you go through the game. You can draw a card as an action, you can rest where you discard a supply to heal 2 damage, or you can channel, gaining 1 focus and chaining 1 alter die to a result of your choice. So you're going to go ahead and gain focus, which is a resource you can use across the course of the game, and you can therefore go ahead and change one of the dice back to that result you need in order to spend it on future cards. So the heroes are taking 3 actions on their turn, and alternating between taking actions on their cards themselves to attack, to deal damage, playing cards for their effects, moving around the dungeon, or some of those maintenance actions to recover health, or to make sure the focus dice are helped set up to help them through accomplishing their cards as ideally as possible. Once all the heroes are done with their turn, you're going to go ahead and proceed with the threat turn. You're going to go ahead, in any order, each hero resolves the activate text on each card in their threat area from left to right. You're going to have these cards in your threat area from left to right you have to go ahead and resolve, and those are the enemies that are going to be dealt to you as you go through the game, and you have to resolve them, activating them to attack whoever's closest and deal the damage, all following the various rules on their specific cards. Again, they have an activate effect, engage, inflict. They have these various tests over here that'll be doing different tests based on your own attributes. Whenever you see a test over there, you're being mindful of your own attributes and how they're going to play out, while again, dealing with all the damage, mindful of their stats, their shield, their armor, their speed, all those things as you go through the game. Then you're going to go ahead and take a villain turn. When you're done with the threat turn, you're going to do a villain turn. We're going to resolve the activate text on each card in the villain area, then draw and resolve a villain card, and if the villain's been defeated, each hero must draw a threat card. So that villain that acts as a clock on the dungeon will eventually be showing up, but initially they'll just be throwing various bad things at you while you go through the game, until eventually you go ahead and do the quest turn, where you go ahead and resolve the quest phase as well. So effectively, all the decks are taking their turn. The heroes run their turn, you have the dungeon running its turn, you have the villain running its turn, and finally the quest running its turn, all while you try to slowly move through the scenario, accomplishing your goals and taking down baddies along the way. That's basically how you play the game. Everything else kind of comes into play based on the actual, past details of, how things spawn and the various activations and starting off the dungeon. Lots of kind of details we're not really getting into. Armor, damaging, attacking. We should talk about rolling dice over here, because rolling dice is a lot of fun. When you attack, you're going to test, or whenever you do anything in the game, forget attacking, whenever you do anything in the game, you're going to be resolving tests. When enemies attack you, when you attack enemies, you're always resolving dice tests using your stat in question. So if I go ahead and do a stat, resolving this particular 3-die stat over there, I'm going to roll the 3 dice, and then from there, this is a good example, we have 1 exploding die, which is a success, plus we roll another die. We're going to go ahead and have another success over here, and then these 3 other symbols means we can spend or gain focus. Effectively, whenever you roll on those things, you can either gain focus, which you can then use, and you can use it to spend it as well, or you can spend focus to count it as a success. So you always have good things on your dice. One of the nice things about the game is effectively there are no misses. There's either choose to spend focus as a currency to achieve your result, gain a success and either spend focus or gain focus, or alternatively get the exploding dice. And exploding dice, you roll a handful of dice in the game as you level up, and you have a bunch of, I have an exploding die there, I have an exploding die, we're going to go roll an extra one, and then boom, so you can have giant handfuls of success. These dice are always giving you stuff. The question is, are they giving you enough stuff? Because you're going to need to actually get those results in order to accomplish whatever quests you're dealing with, or not taking damage or dealing damage, all of those as you go through that skill check system. That's basically what's happening in Alter Quest. There's also a campaign mode to dive through, but past that, you pick a hero, or multiple heroes. You pick multiple heroes, you pick an enemy deck, a threat deck, you pick a villain deck, you pick the quest you're going on, you combine all of that, and then you start the process of wandering through the dungeon, exploring the various terrain features, interacting with the various terrain features. Each quest will give you minor setup instructions that adjust, what might be in the deck or how you're going to deal with that. You'll be dealing with lurkers that will show up as well. Very often in the game, you're going to have lurkers that will show up, little kind of nemesis that will start attacking you, that may have miniatures that are not from your specific dungeon deck, that may have miniatures that are not from your specific threat deck as they follow you around the dungeon. And in fact, some of the quests even deal with them as kind of chasing you throughout the dungeon as you figure out your unique lurkers in the dungeon. Lots of fun little things over there. We have search cards, we have equipment cards, we have tons and tons of cards, and then lots of stacks of tokens as well. And that is basically Alter Quest, which brings us to the review, starting off with ease of play, which is not the best way to start. The reason I haven't played this game for 2 years is because I read the rules a long time ago. I set up the game, I got it all prepped, I got it all ready, I dived into it, or started trying the process of diving into it, and I found the rules are not that long, but they're also not that intuitive. I feel the rules could be significantly shorter and significantly clearer than what they are. They are not that long, but they're also just fiddly and confusing to go through. It was certainly a barrier in my ability to jump in and get the game running. Also very low on images, on pictures, on examples, and that kind of thing that can really streamline that learning process. And so there's a reason this game has sat around unplayed for quite some time. I eventually powered through it and got it to where it is now, but there's certainly not the worst rulebook I've read, but it's kind of deceptive in the sense that it reads fairly easily, but is not 100% clear as you go through it. I will also say, to its credit, I find that whenever you're dealing with learning modular-based systems, where you kind of have to learn the framework and then apply the modularity of whatever encounter you're going through, I find that also does add a degree of complexity to being able to dive into a game, because you're learning X and then playing X plus Y, which is always slightly different. So, small amount of credit there in terms of that it is harder to pick up modular systems, but even so, I felt this is not that complicated a game to actually go through and learn. I've been able to get others up and running very easily in this, but the rulebook itself was not the best. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, there are a bunch of things that I like about this game. There are a bunch of things. Although we'll talk about it more in final thoughts and rating, but for right now, there are a bunch of things I like about the game, but most of the things that the game does well, I feel are present in most dungeon crawlers. Meaning the general concept of being a dungeon crawler, of having heroes, of having powers and abilities and cards, and diving into a dungeon, most of the things that Alter Quest does well, I feel are present in the genre and not necessarily present in Alter Quest, if that makes sense. So I'm both going to talk about the things that I liked, while also being fairly critical of the areas in which the game I feel lets me down. Starting off though, one area that's not always present, I love the exploding dice. There is something incredibly satisfying about rolling 4 dice and knowing that you may end up with 7 successes as a result of it. That system is wonderfully done. Now the game balances it by making sure that you need more successes, so that you always need anyways more than what you'll get. Meaning, in other words, if I tell you that on a die that has a 50% chance of generating a success, if I tell you that you need 2 successes across 4 dice, that's statistically average. But if I make sure that all dice always have successes, and I tell you you need 3 or 4 successes instead, the difficulty is still there, but the sense of accomplishment as you roll a bunch of successes is very present in this game. I love this. Is something that's present in a lot of their games and a lot of the Sailor Brothers games. But the idea that you can roll a handful of dice, and I can have potentially 4 successes on them, because every single face is good for you. Even though the game scales that balance around it and makes sure that you need more successes, I like it. It is satisfying to have exploding dice. It is satisfying to roll chunks of dice and just have a bunch of successes and, boom, we got an exploding die. Is it exciting? Of course it's exciting, because now I have more successes on a pool of dice, and I can spend that focus to get every single die in my favor. And it also means that I can control to a certain amount. If I have my focus saved up, I can control for a certain amount of guaranteeing the times when I want a more successful advantage. I love how much fun the dice are to utilize as you go through the game, for the most part over here. I will say that this dice pool over here is kind of more of a take it or leave it for me. You're managing the Alter die pool in order to utilize the dice to power your cards. It kind of comes down to a lot of luck and maintenance there as you try to spend a die over there and use it for your own resources. Also being mindful that sometimes the dungeon is using the dice in their pool for its own resources. So sometimes you're specifically trying to deny the dungeon there. That can feel rewarding at times, can feel like a maintenance puzzle, but overall the focus dice is a different situation. But I will say that another plus that the game has is the variety to the way the scenarios, content, heroes, villains, bosses, all that stuff comes together. Very often when you have these big box dungeon crawlers, especially when there's crowdfunding content and a ton of overflow and extras, sometimes you have a ton of stuff and no great way to utilize them and to know how to utilize them. Alter Quest does a great job of kind of giving you everything you need, and you can easily dive into the games and experiences because that plug and play system of a quest, a villain, a threat deck, and the heroes is there. You have extra heroes? Great. Pick and choose your decks. You have extra villains? Awesome. Throw in whatever villain deck you want. You have that knowledge of how to mix and match systems to be able to utilize all the content you have. That gives you a lot of variety to the overall puzzle you're engaging with, which is mostly a pro. And then lastly, I'll say that, again, like a typical dungeon crawler, this game does have fun things that are working in your favor. The heroes do have cards that will give you powerful moments where you feel like you do something fun and you're able to move 2 and then use that extra die from the focus pool and deal 6 damage to an enemy. The game will have those fun moments just based on the card play that are present in this system. But overall, it is a dungeon crawler. It does a lot of things that dungeon crawlers do well. It has that system of exploration. The static board doesn't really bother me. In general, you have a very static board over here, and the board, I believe, is double-sided if I recall. But over here, the game still feels like a sense of exploration because you can kind of explore how you want and engage with the world around you how you want, and it's much more about the quest you're dealing with than any sense of actual dungeon crawling exploration. And so it gives you a very easy to set up and play system with a lot of the general highs that you get in a dungeon crawler, with exploding dice and just lots of variety to the system. And that's where we start diving into the things we don't like, or the things I don't like. As far as things I don't like in the system, first of all, I hate's a strong word. I really dislike the way everything is kind of structured as a skill test. The way heroes have 6 different attributes on them, and everything comes down to testing some sort of skill against them. Now, these attributes have values: your agility, your strength, your this, your that. I don't know, I don't care. I don't feel any sense of identity to the characters. I feel they have random attributes that, again, there is some thematic aspect of what they are. I stopped caring when I started playing, and for me, the fact that everything gets tested against a skill attribute means that it doesn't feel, when I'm playing the game, it rarely feels like I'm throwing a dagger across the room. It doesn't feel like I'm casting a spell that will take you down. It always feels like I'm testing an attribute. That's all I'm doing. It's skill test, skill test, skill test, and that might be something players like. For me, it felt like there was a lack of identity behind what I'm doing as a character. I didn't feel like I was an archer adventuring into a maze. I didn't feel like a wizard casting powerful spells. I felt like someone testing skill attributes the entire time as I played through the game. That's where the focus time manipulation puzzle also I found overall frustrating. It kind of lent itself to that feeling of maintenance and bookkeeping as opposed to a real sense of engagement. The fact that enemies kind of deal damage to you by testing your attributes, again, fed into that aspect. Yes, you can thematically do it like, hey, well, if your agility is this and they attack you that, you can thematically justify and rationalize it all you want. But since everything kind of ties into you testing your attributes, first of all, the wording on the cards felt often confusing. It felt like the way an enemy attacks you, it like inflicts it didn't feel like enemies were attacking you, and it barely felt like you were attacking them. It felt like the game is skill test, skill test, skill test, followed by skill tests, such that the entire experience feels abstracted. The fact that when you're wandering across the dungeon, I kudos the fact that it's easy to set up on table, but the fact that as you're wandering around the dungeon, the actual sense of what the dungeon is or exploration doesn't really matter. Most of the time, at least in the quests I played, it doesn't really seem like it matters. It's kind of like you're just going through a procedural aspect. Could the final quest be here? Sure, it could be here, it could be here, it could be here. It kind of depends on the process in which you explore the dungeon as opposed to an actual sense of exploration. So it kind of made the entire experience feel very abstracted as you go through it. There isn't a cohesive set of what you are doing in the game. I appreciate the plug-and-play nature of things, and I think it lends itself to a lot of variety, but if I'm playing one scenario with one villain, one quest, one boss, and everything feels abstracted in what it's doing, when I played against different enemies, I didn't feel a strong sense of identity to those enemies. It didn't feel like, ooh, I'm facing off against this type of boss or those types of bosses. When I'm playing against different kinds of, if I'm playing, I don't know, I can't remember, but I have Massive Darkness, say I'm currently playing through Massive Darkness. When I'm playing against different types of enemies, there's more of an identity to them. Over here, I rarely felt that sense of identity or threat. It just feels like rolling skill test after skill test after skill test. The gameplay loop itself as you play through it feels fairly repetitive without standout moments in the game. You're going through the dungeon, you open up a new door, you grab a new door, you spawn some things, you throw the thing down, you're in there, and then you face off against whatever other enemies are present as you go through this procedural adventure. For the most part, the gameplay loop often felt repetitive, it didn't feel rewarding enough, and even the quests didn't stand out significantly as far as how you engage with the game. There are differences, to be sure. Escaping versus finding an altar versus chasing your lurker nemesises, those are all different experiences that you'll have, and they will force you to have small adjustments as far as how you deal with it, but the keyword is small. The general sense of open a door, interact with terrain element, kill the various things, that loop is present in every single adventure, and it's not broken up by enough variety of the experience, or enough even feeling like what you're doing in the experience. When I draw cards, it got to the point in this game where even as I drew cards for my various hero decks, it didn't feel overly exciting to draw the next card because everything feels like just another mathy skill test. There's no strong sense of identity to the experience as you go through it. And then lastly, just the series of the way it assigns monsters to your heroes and the way they're kind of your monster and you activate them felt unnecessarily complicated and not intuitive. Not a big deal by any means, but it didn't feel like it kind of added to that sense that everything you're doing here is maintenance based, and it didn't add to the sense that you are in a dungeon, you're facing off against other enemies. Everything feels abstracted to the detriment of the experience, in my opinion. As far as I can see others not liking, I actually left that section blank for this video because I think I have enough of a list of things I don't like that, I don't know. I don't know what else there'd be here necessarily, but there's a lot of abstraction to the experience. Maybe you don't like that as well. I don't know. As far as final thoughts on Alter Quest, I debated how to rate this one because Alter Quest is not a bad experience, but games don't exist in a vacuum, and I think that's part of something that I have to be mindful of as I rate this experience. If Alter Quest were the only dungeon crawler I had, this would be a great game. Genuinely. There's enough things going on here that are fun, that are enjoyable, that I could see myself playing this a lot more if games existed in a vacuum, but they do not exist in a vacuum. The things that Alter Quest does well, I think most dungeon crawlers do well. As you explore through the dungeon, you'll encounter enemies. Enemies will be a threat. You'll take them out. You'll roll dice. And again, those exploding dice, those are a lot of fun. I like rolling those handfuls. Even right now, even this stupid little video here, I got a crit over here. Now I want to roll again and see what else I get. The exploding dice are fun. The game has a lot of elements that are in other dungeon crawlers and are fun to go through and explore. And a lot of things around it work pretty decently. But in the sense that when you compare it to other games, when you compare ultimately a decent amount of rules that were not eminently clear, a decent amount of setup and tear down that I don't think is simply worth the payoff, to me this is a 2.5 out of 5. It's a game that and again, all my ratings have a meaning, I don't really heavily address them, but a 2.5 for me is a game that I would prefer not to play, but would be willing to under the right circumstances, and I think that's what Alter Quest is for me. I think it's a game I'd prefer not to continue playing. In the world of dungeon crawlers that are out there, many others give me much more of a compelling reason to dive into them, and Alter Quest is a game I was excited for because it does seem to be a dungeon crawler system based on the Street Masters universe, which I really enjoyed Street Masters. I thought Street Masters was excellent, and I thought it would work here, but everything just feels so dialed down and abstracted. It doesn't feel like it comes together and gives me a great experience. It feels like it comes together and gives me an experience that plugs and plays very well, but without any strong sense of soul behind it. A 2.5 out of 5. In any case, well, recommendations. Speaking of Street Masters, as far as other game recommendations, first of all, Street Masters. If you're looking for a game that does take the MDS system and gave me a very satisfying, very solid experience, I really enjoyed Street Masters. I'm kind of disappointed that Alter Quest feels somehow so similar and yet so far at the same time. And then if you're looking for a dungeon crawler that just lets you roll handfuls of dice, while in my opinion giving you a significantly better and more engaging and just more fun experience while maintaining a large degree of the plug and play that is present in Alter Quest, Massive Darkness is an excellent experience that on the surface hits all the same notes that Alter Quest does, but in my opinion does so significantly better in nearly every single avenue. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.